welcome to Free Science Fiction Stories. Today's story is Zero G Heist. Join Cass and his expert crew as they embark on a high-stakes, zero-gravity operation that could change everything.
The transit module lurched as it made its final docking maneuver. A low vibration hummed through the cabin, metal groaning as maglocks secured the ship to Pinnacle Station's orbital ring. Cass tightened the straps of his harness and exhaled slowly. No mistakes, no second chances. They were here to steal one of the most valuable materials in space, and failure meant a slow death in vacuum. Cordova's favorite punishment. He was not a forgiving or understanding man. The module's interior was small and stale, the recycled air thick with the scent of synthetic upholstery and too many bodies pressed together. Freight workers, station personnel, and a few corporate execs, all crammed into the narrow compartment, waiting for the airlock to cycle. Juno leaned back in his seat, arms crossed lazily, but his eyes never stopped scanning the passengers. They were approaching the first hurdle of this job, getting past the Orbital Launch Authority checkpoints. "How many OLA officers are on board?" Juno murmured. 3. Shui responded without looking up. 2 near the exit, 1 pretending to nap. "Noted," Cass said. Juno hadn't stopped asking questions the whole way in. He hated when that guy got chatty before a job. It usually meant he was more nervous than he let on. A green light flashed, a chime rang out. The hatch hissed open and they moved in pairs, Cass first, Raylor at his side. Behind them, Shui and Drayan blended in with a group of incoming freight workers, their stolen OLA contractor IDs loaded into the station's manifest. Juno trailed near the rear, looking every bit like a washed-up transport pilot. The whole station was basically a zero-gravity environment, and many of the people disembarking were unfamiliar with how to move. It was entertaining to watch, at least. Pinnacle Station stretched out before them, a massive industrial complex floating in permanent microgravity, designed to be the heart of Earth's orbital freight system. And yet, it was a half-finished corpse. The failure of the Spire project had left entire sections dark and uninhabited, vast corridors filled with frozen workstations and forgotten infrastructure. They had studied the schematics for months. The inner ring was active, functional, populated. The outer shell was abandoned, cold, and quiet. "First checkpoint in 60 seconds. Shui's voice crackled through their private encrypted cybercoms, her voice calm and steady. "Keep your pace normal. No sudden movements." Cass didn't look at the OLA guards ahead, but he counted them. 6 at the main checkpoint. 2 more standing along the secondary corridor, rifles mag-clamped to their backs. They weren't expecting trouble, yet. The crew moved in perfect synchronization, blending in as they approached the customs station. The low hum of voices, beeping terminals, and station announcements filled the air. Cass slid his forged ID across the scanner. A dull beep. The terminal light flashed green. Cleared. He moved forward. Raylor next. Another beep. Another green light. Cass exhaled slowly through his nose, keeping his expression neutral as the others stepped up one by one. Shui, cleared. Drayan, cleared. Juno. The officer took Juno's ID, scanning it once, then again. A second passed, then another. Cass felt his pulse rise, though his face betrayed nothing. The OLA officer glanced at the terminal screen. His gloved hand hovered too long over the console. Cass resisted the urge to reach for his weapon. Too soon, the entire mission rested on not being flagged. Once OLA saw a discrepancy, it wouldn't be one officer looking at them. It would be the entire station locking down. Juno gave a lazy smirk, feigning impatience. "Gonna take all day, officer?" The guard didn't react, just checked the screen one more time. Cass's fingers curled near the seam of his jumpsuit. 1 second too long, and this was a firefight. A long pause, then a dull chime. "You clear, move along." Cass exhaled. No alarms, no red lights, no sudden gunfire. They were in. He didn't look back as they entered the next corridor, but he knew the officer was still watching. He could feel it. Cass led the team down a wide industrial corridor, its walls lined with exposed conduits, oxygen scrubbers, and faded safety warnings printed in 3 languages. The lighting here was functional but dim, casting long shadows over the floating cargo crates and handrails that jutted from the walls. The hum of distant machinery reverberated through the structure, a constant reminder that this was a working station, even if half of it was abandoned. "How long before security rotation?" Cass asked. 4 minutes, Shui answered, eyes flicking between her tablet and the dim corridor ahead. Juno smirked, catching a handhold with ease. "Gotta say, Cass, this is the cleanest infiltration we've pulled in a long time." "That's because we haven't done it yet," Cass muttered. They reached an intersection. Ahead, the active industrial sector. Below, a forgotten maintenance tunnel leading to the storage bays. "All right," Cass murmured, unclipping a small holopad from his belt. A wire-frame blueprint of Pinnacle Station flickered to life, showing the industrial sector in front of them. A blinking red dot marked their target. The storage vault. "We need a way in. Options?" Sui responded first, already running calculations. "Main entrance is locked with OLA clearance. I could brute force it, but that'd set off alarms. We go that route, we need a distraction." "Alternatives?" Cass asked. "Venting system. Cargo bays have pressure equalizers running along the outer hull. If we override a few safety protocols, we can pop a hatch and slip inside without setting off internal motion detectors." "Problems?" Cass asked. 1. Doing that means a hard vacuum breach on our way in. 2. If anyone's in there, we'll have nowhere to run." Silence. They all knew the risks. Cass looked to Rallor. "Thoughts?" The enforcer cracked his knuckles against the grip of his sidearm. "We do this clean, we have time to breathe. We go loud, we're running the whole way out. I say we take the venting system." Cass nodded, considering. The cargo bays were deep in the industrial sector, where automated freight drones handled most of the loading. No civilians, no casual foot traffic, just Orbital Launch Authority security and massive empty spaces designed for storage, maintenance, and loading operations. And if someone was already in there, it would be a heck of a place to fight. Before they could move, Shui cursed softly. "We've got a problem. Station's automated cargo drones are still running the loop around the storage vault," she said, looking at her handheld display. Cass frowned. That wasn't unusual. Drones worked on preset rotations, moving materials from inbound haulers to the station's inventory system. But something felt off. "Shouldn't they be idle at this hour?" Cass asked. Shui hesitated. "Yeah, they should." A faint flicker ran across her interface and she froze. "Cass, someone's been in the system. The drone loop was manually altered 30 minutes ago. And now the station's cargo drones were going back and forth, moving in circles in the restricted zone. That wasn't part of the plan." Cass's grip tightened around the guideline as they floated through the access tunnel, their movements silent, deliberate, focused. The station had no artificial gravity. It was a maze of cargo racks, maneuvering rails, and dark corners where the emergency lights barely reached. Every breath felt louder in the stillness, their controlled motions sending only the faintest vibrations through the station's cold metal shell. The storage vault was ahead. Shui hovered near an access terminal, plugging in a bypass module. The screen flickered as she worked, lines of code running like water. "Security status?" Cass murmured. "Still showing sealed," Shui said, frowning. "Cut the alarms. Get us in," Cass ordered. Sui's fingers moved fast. A moment later, the secondary hatchlight flickered green. "We're clear." The vault door slid open, revealing a cavernous storage bay lined with towering racks of reinforced containers. The space was dimly lit, the emergency lights casting a sickly blue hue over everything. Cass moved in first, activating the grip strips on his boots, keeping himself anchored as he surveyed the room. Something was wrong. The space should have been full. spools of carbon microtubules stacked and locked in their designated storage racks. Instead, the racks stood empty, their hardened locks disengaged, containment units pulled apart. "Where are the spools?" Juno muttered, voice low. The answer became obvious as they moved further in. The massive storage racks, where the carbon microtubule spools were supposed to be secured, weren't just empty. They had been cut apart. Deep gouges ran along the metal containment units, jagged scars torn through reinforced plating. The edges weren't from a plasma cutter or a mechanical tool. No clean weld lines, no torch burns, no slicing residue. It looked like something had torn through the metal with sheer, unnatural force. Zui drifted near one of the racks, running a gloved hand over the damage. "This isn't normal," she murmured. Cass scanned the room. Floating nearby was a piece of broken plating, a chunk of metal that had once been part of the vault's containment system. It drifted in slow motion, spinning lazily in the low light. Then he saw it. A handprint. Not human. The indentation in the metal was jagged, inhuman, made by something with elongated digits and unnatural spacing. The shape was smeared slightly, as if whatever had touched it had been partially shifting within its own form. Cass felt the tension in his gut tighten. Zhui, security logs. Now. Zhui was already at the nearest control panel, bypassing the local logs. The screen flickered, static warping across the interface. The last entry was 35 minutes ago. The security feed loaded. A wide-angle view of the vault appeared, motionless, undisturbed. The containment racks stood intact, nothing amiss. Then, movement. Cass's blood ran cold. The figures moved without a sound, gliding through the vault with eerie efficiency. Not humans. They entered through the far breach, their gel-covered bodies shifting as they moved, adjusting in microgravity like they had evolved for it. Their limbs flexed unnaturally, three-legged, three-armed forms curling and unfolding as they worked in silent unison. The gel was something new. Whistlers could survive in a hard vacuum for some time but could still be frozen solid. The gel must be protecting them. Cass had expected damage, chaos, frantic looting, but that's not what he saw. They weren't smashing and raiding. They were taking specific materials. The whistlers moved in formation, passing spools between them, packing them into some kind of containment netting, securing their stolen cargo. Cass watched as one whistler placed its hands against a storage unit, the gel around its limbs shifting, molding to the surface like a suction grip. It tensed, then ripped the reinforced panel apart with a slow, methodical motion. Cass clenched his jaw as the footage continued. Then, at the edge of the frame, one of them stopped. It turned. It looked directly at the camera. Cass didn't breathe. The silence that followed was thick. Juno shifted uncomfortably, eyes still locked on the blank screen. "I really hate how they move," he muttered. Rayler's fingers twitched near his sidearm. His voice was flat but edged with tension. "What do they want with carbon microtubules?" Cass didn't have an answer, but none of that mattered now. They had one job, get the spools back, or die trying. He turned, his voice calm but final. "Get ready to fight. We're going after them." Juno clicked his tongue. "Stealing stolen goods. Ain't that poetic?" Cass propelled himself forward, one hand on the maneuvering rail, the other gripping his sidearm. The vault's emergency hatch had been forced open from the inside, a jagged gap in reinforced plating leading into the station's abandoned outer sectors. The whistlers had moved with purpose, slipping deeper into the dead zones of Pinnacle Station. "They couldn't have gotten far," Raller grunted, locking down the mag strips on his boots before pushing into the tunnel. "They're fast, but they're carrying cargo," Cass reminded him. "That slows them down. We can still cut them off." Jue's fingers danced over her interface, trying to pull up the station schematics. The display flickered erratically. That's weird, half the maintenance network just went dark, she muttered. Define dark, Juno said, floating just behind her. Dark as in power is down, no internal sensors, no station comms in those sections. They're using the blackout zones to stay hidden. Cass clenched his jaw. That meant the Whistlers weren't just lucky. They knew how to move unseen, avoiding areas where the station's automated systems could track them. That kind of navigation wasn't random, it was tactical. They know the layout, Cass murmured. They know exactly where they're going. Which means we have to get moving, Sui said, already plotting alternative routes. A blip appeared on her HUD. I found them. The thieves moved fast. Cass led the way, Magboots disengaged as he kicked off the maneuvering rail, propelling himself through the dim maintenance corridor. The others followed, their zero-G thruster packs firing in short bursts to navigate the tight space. Up ahead, the tunnel opened into a sprawling cargo junction, its structure a chaotic mess of floating containers, inactive drones, and hanging gantries. The station's half-finished spire connections jutted out in uneven patterns, creating a field of debris and dead machinery left to drift. A faint movement at the far end caught Cass's eye. The Whistlers. They moved in perfect unison, their gel suits flexing as they twisted through the space with an unnatural ease. 3 arms, 3 legs, each limb adjusting mid-flight, shifting within the gel membrane as if it were swimming through air. Cass clicked his comm, eyes on, 3 ahead, carrying the spools. Weapons? Raylor asked. Looks like one might have some kind of weapon or something, Cass said. Not sure what. We move in close and fast. Stay spread out, don't let them flank. How do you flank in zero-G? Juno muttered. We're about to find out, Cass said, shifting his grip on the gun. Go. The moment the thieves engaged, the Whistlers reacted instantly. One of them twisted mid-air, its head pivoting unnaturally as it locked onto them. Instead of fleeing, it shifted its cargo, passing one of the spools to another Whistler, while the third one produced an elongated metallic object from its suit. Then it fired. Cass barely had time to react before the projectile whipped past him, punching through the bulkhead behind him. They're shooting, he barked, ducking behind a drifting storage crate. Yeah, I noticed. Juno fired a few wild shots, but the Whistlers were already moving, darting through the industrial maze with precision that didn't make sense. Cass pushed off, igniting his thrusters, closing the gap between him and the nearest Whistler. The creature saw him coming and adjusted its trajectory mid-air, twisting at an unnatural angle, avoiding his line of fire. These things don't move like us, Sui said, struggling to keep them on sensors. They don't waste momentum. They don't even course correct. They just know where to go. Cass gritted his teeth. If the Whistlers were too fast to track normally, they'd have to outmaneuver them. Trey, can you override an emergency bulkhead? Force them into a dead end? Already working on it, she said, fingers flying over her pad. Give me 30 seconds. We don't have 30, Ralph snapped, firing a round that barely grazed the Whistler ahead. The creature didn't flinch, didn't react, just kept moving. Up ahead, the Whistlers shot through an open airlock, slipping into another corridor. They're going into the unpowered sections, Shui warned. That whole stretch is dead. No lights, no gravity, no atmosphere. I can't do much without power, but the emergency systems might still be working. Cass didn't hesitate. Then we go dark too. The moment they passed through the airlock, the station's emergency lighting vanished. The corridor ahead was pure black. No flickering panels, no HUD tracking, no station hum. Just the vast, empty silence of a sector that had been abandoned for years. They activated infrared. The outlines of the Whistlers emerged in sharp contrast, their gel suits faintly glowing from internal heat. Floating debris, half-assembled machinery, broken scaffolding still drifting from the spire's failure. It was a graveyard of construction, a labyrinth of obstacles where one wrong push could send them spinning out of control. Stay close, Cass ordered, voice low. The whistlers moved with unnerving speed, weaving between the wreckage with precision. Then Cass saw it. One of them wasn't fleeing anymore. It was waiting. Positioned just beyond a floating piece of wreckage, it held something in its grip, a sleek metallic object. Then it aimed directly at them. "Down," Cass ordered. A sharp pulse of energy shot through the corridor. The moment it struck the debris, everything shifted. The wreckage, previously adrift, lurched violently as the projectile detonated, sending shards of twisted metal in every direction. Juno yelped as he barely dodged a jagged pipe spinning toward him. "What was that?" Tsue snapped. "Some kind of energy charge," Cass growled. "They're not just running anymore, they're trying to kill us." Rayler fired at the Whistler, but the creature had already moved, using the chaos of the debris field to slip deeper into the blackened corridors. "We need to cut them off now," Cass said. "Shui, override the next bulkhead, seal them in." "I'm on it," she said, frantically working. "But if they have more charges, they might just blow the doors." "Then we get there first," Cass said, gripping his thruster controls. "Juno, Raylor, flank left. Shui, dray in. Take the right tunnel. I'll push center." A sharp click sounded in Shui's comm. "Bulkhead override engaged." "It's closing in 10 seconds. Cass ignited his thrusters, hurtling forward through the industrial wreckage, heart hammering. They had one shot to box them in, one shot to turn this chase into a fight, and if they failed, they'd never catch up. The bulkhead slammed shut, its reinforced plating sealing off the Whistler's escape route. They were trapped. "We have them boxed in," Shui confirmed, her voice tense over comms. "Airlock beyond this sector is sealed. No way out unless they cut through." "Then we finish this now," Cass growled. Ahead, the Whistlers had already shifted, adjusting their formation mid-air. They weren't panicked. They weren't even hesitating. The way they moved was calculated. 3 figures, shifting their cargo, positioning themselves to counterattack. "Make it count," Cass ordered. The thieves opened fire. The first burst of gunfire cracked through the silence. In microgravity, every shot had a price. Newton's third law didn't give exceptions. Each bullet sent the shooter drifting, forcing them to brace harder, adjusting their aim mid-motion. Cass barely had time to register it. One of them twisted in mid-air, its radial symmetry giving it an unnatural ability to pivot and shift without losing momentum. It folded its body, letting the first rounds pass harmlessly through the space where its torso had been a second ago. Another Whistler tucked its cargo beneath a secondary limb, shielding it while spinning along its central axis. Juno swore. "They're dodging!" "Keep firing!" Cass barked, switching to controlled bursts. His rifle kicked hard as he adjusted his stance, pressing his back against a drifting container to counter the recoil. His shots found their mark. One hit a Whistler square in the upper limb, severing it cleanly. For a split second, Cass felt a grim satisfaction. Then he saw what happened next. The Whistler didn't slow down. Instead of panicking, it adapted. Its remaining limbs shifted, its gel suit redistributing its balance instantly. It folded its torso inward, using its secondary arms to compensate, adjusting without hesitation. The stump of its missing limb already began sealing over, reforming in real time. Cass twisted, firing another burst, but the Whistlers moved through the debris field like liquid, pivoting and countering every motion. Gunfire wasn't working fast enough. Rayler snarled, drawing his combat knife as one of the Whistlers shot toward him, arms unfolding. He lashed out, catching the creature's gel suit just above the plating of its central torso. The blade sliced through the outer membrane, glowing fluid spraying into the zero-G void. The Whistler convulsed for half a second, then did something horrifying. It latched onto Raylor. Before he could disengage, the Whistler folded around him, using its remaining arms to wrap around his limbs, curling its body like a constricting serpent. "Raylor!" Cass shouted. Rayler gritted his teeth, trying to shake free. The Whistler's damaged limb was already reforming, the gel shifting, repurposing itself into a hardened structure where the severed joint had been. Zui pulled her sidearm but hesitated. A shot now could hit Rowler just as easily as the Whistler. Cass moved in. He pushed off the nearest handrail, slamming into the tangled mass of bodies. He grabbed Rallor's harness and yanked hard, sending them both spinning free from the Whistler's grip. The creature jerked backward, stabilizing instantly. Juno had seen enough. "We need to end this fast. Tell me we can vent them." "No good," Zui snapped. "This section still has pressure. We risk decompressing ourselves." "Then we do it the hard way," Cass said, breathing heavily. Rayler, still recovering from the grapple, unclipped a shock baton from his belt. "Let's see how they like a charge." The Whistlers shifted their stance, adjusting to the new threat. Their movements weren't as smooth as before. They were reacting now, instead of moving with total confidence. "Juno, give me a push," Raylor barked. Juno grabbed the back of Rallor's harness and launched him forward. A controlled shove, sending him straight toward the nearest Whistler. Rallor twisted mid-air, baton primed, and jammed the electrified end directly into the Whistler's central mass. The effect was immediate. The Whistler convulsed violently, its gel suit rippling as the charge surged through it. The gel itself seemed to reject the electricity at first, writhing and fluctuating before suddenly locking up, stiffening where the current ran. The creature's limbs spasmed, momentarily unresponsive. "Now!" Cass shouted. Raylor didn't hesitate. He raised his weapon and fired point blank. The bullets punched through the Whistler's torso, severing its secondary limbs in an instant. This time, the damage didn't immediately repair itself. They had found a weakness. "Electricity disrupts the gel," Cass snapped. "Keep hitting them." Zui was already moving. She pulled a conductive tether from her kit, a thin length of charged filament, and launched it toward the second Whistler. The wire coiled around its torso, delivering an immediate jolt. The Whistler shuddered, its limbs locking up just enough for Juno to take his shot. A single well-placed burst tore through its core. The creature froze before going limp, its body spinning weightlessly in the void. Only one remained. But it didn't flee. Instead, it studied them. Its head tilted, triangular rows of eyes flickering like data processing in real time. It had seen what they had done. Cass raised his weapon. Then the Whistler launched itself backward, firing a thruster hidden beneath its gel membrane. It moved too fast, twisting into a small maintenance hatch, disappearing into the unpowered sector beyond. Silence. Breathing. The firefight was over. Many of the spools had been damaged, used as shields by the Whistlers to absorb bullets. But there might still be enough to make the job worthwhile. Juno let out a slow breath. "That was the worst thing I've ever done in Zero G." "We're not done yet," Cass said, scanning their surroundings. "Cordova will make this look like a cakewalk if we can't salvage enough of this stuff and get it back to him. We all owe him a lot of money." Two Whistler corpses drifted motionless in the dim emergency light, their fluid leaking in suspended droplets. The last one was gone. Zhu let out a shaky breath. "We have the spools. Do we still go after it?" "No." "We need to get out of here," Cass muttered, making his decision, "before it learns how to kill us faster." Rallor shoved one of the floating Whistler bodies away. "I'm good with that." B was already plotting an escape route. They had the cargo, now they just had to make it out alive. "We need to move. Now." Cass checked his HUD, his eyes narrowing as the station's security net shifted. Orbital Launch Authority had changed their patrol routes. A rapid response team had been dispatched. Something had tripped the alarm. What happened? Due's fingers danced over her interface, scanning for any breaches in their cover. "One of their patrols is down," Cass muttered. Raylor frowned. "You think the Whistler got them?" Cass didn't answer. Whatever had happened, OLA was mobilizing. The team had a limited window before security would lock down the station. If they hesitated now, they weren't getting off Pinnacle. New plan, Cass said, pushing off into the corridor. We'll have to find a way to ditch this haul and leave separately. The plan had been to load the cargo onto a waiting ship that was in the regular loading queue, an old rust bucket they had used before. It was functional but had sat in an atmospheric dry dock for a long time. But that plan was out the window with the increased security. The corridors leading back toward the public sector were busier than expected. Workers, freight loaders, and station personnel moved with a sense of urgency that hadn't been there before. The alarms flashing in the distance weren't lockdown sirens, but high security alerts, controlled sweeps for a breach. Someone, maybe an officer, maybe just a dock worker who saw the wrong thing, had raised the alert. "This is getting tight," Juno muttered as they slipped through a side passage. "How do we smuggle a 1 billion credit payload past the checkpoints? These containers aren't exactly easy to hide." "We hide it in plain sight," Cass said. They floated near an active cargo terminal where freight was being loaded onto outbound transports. An automated crane whirred overhead, pulling sealed cargo containers toward docking bays. Workers, clad in maintenance EVA suits, moved with rote efficiency, their eyes focused on their tasks, uninterested in anything outside their work. Cass scanned a nearby manifest on a terminal. A shipment of station salvage was scheduled for transport in 20 minutes, bound for a decommissioning yard near the belt. "We slipped the spools in with the rest of the junk," Cass said. "Crew, can you override the shipment log?" "I'm trying," she murmured. A few keystrokes, a line of forged credentials, and the manifest updated. Drayan moved first, securing the stolen spools inside one of the outbound crates, magnetically sealing them beneath layers of scrap materials. "Cargo is secure," Shea confirmed, sealing the terminal. "Once we get ourselves out of here, we hit that transport and take back our cut," Rowler said. Cass exhaled. "One part down. We need a distraction," he said. "I can give you one," Drayan said. Cass turned. "You have an idea?" "More like an opportunity," Drayan smirked, pointing toward a maintenance hatch near the lower sector. The area controlled a secondary coolant system, a non-essential substation designed to regulate Pinnacle's older heat exchangers. If someone were to, say, override the safety valves, Cass caught on immediately. "You could make it look like a coolant breach." "Bingo," Drayan said. I was already typing. "I can make it look like a system error, but someone has to go in and trigger the manual override." Cass didn't like it. Splitting up was dangerous. They had no idea how many security teams were already moving, but there was no alternative. "I'll handle it," Drayan said, pushing off toward the hatch. "You get to the ship. I'll meet you at the docking bay." Cass hesitated for half a second, then nodded. "Make it quick." Cass, Juno, Jouet, and Raylor drifted through the transit corridors, blending into the flow of station workers. Their forged credentials still held up, but every checkpoint was a risk. The slightest deviation, the smallest irregularity, and an officer could stop them. Then the alarms changed. A deep klaxon blared through the industrial sector, red warning lights flashing along the corridor walls. "There it is," Juno muttered under his breath. The coolant breach alert had gone station-wide. Cass watched as security officers pivoted, abandoning their static posts to move toward the maintenance sector. Patrols thinned. The main checkpoint, previously crawling with armed officers, was now half-manned, attention divided. "Drayan, here clear," Shue reported. "Already on my way." Drayan's voice came through comms, breathless but steady. Cass let out a slow breath. They had their window, moving toward the cargo exit. The cargo docking bay was a chaotic mess of incoming and outgoing transports, station crews moving fast, officers distracted. The team slipped toward their waiting ship, a rusted but reliable hauler, a relic of the early freight days. Juno hit the access panel and the airlock hissed open. One by one they slipped inside, securing themselves to the deck. "Where's Drayan?" Shue asked. The question barely left her lips when the airlock cycled again. Drayan shot through the hatch, helmet off, grinning. "Miss me?" Juno exhaled sharply. "You cut that way too close, man. I like to keep things exciting. Plus, you'd have a hard time without the getaway driver. Now let's catch up with that garbage hauler." Cass sealed the doors, engaged the docking release, and the ship disengaged from the station with a low vibration. The ship drifted through Pinnacle's outbound lane, silent and unnoticed. They were clear. The garbage hauler drifted silently through space, following a pre-programmed route toward its designated disposal site beyond the belt. Its engines were minimal, designed for slow, steady travel. It had no weapons, no serious defenses. It wasn't built to be robbed, which made it perfect. Cass floated in the airlock of their hauler, staring at the dull, rusted hull of the disposal ship just meters away. The docking clamps engaged with a dull metallic thud, locking the two vessels together. "We're in position," Zia confirmed. "No distress signals, no automated countermeasures. They probably don't even know we're here." "Let's keep it that way," Cass said, pushing off toward the breach point. Drayan moved first, using the mag cutter to carve through the outer maintenance hatch. The metal glowed red-hot, then cooled and curled away, revealing the dimly lit interior of the ship. The smell hit first, stale air thick with decomposing waste. The scent of organic and synthetic refuse compressed into storage units. "Ugh, smells like dead things in here," Juno muttered, floating in behind Cass. "Because there probably are," Rallor grunted, hand on his weapon. "Let's make this quick." They pushed forward through the Zero-G corridors, their boots clanking softly against the deck plating. The disposal ship was small, operated by a skeleton crew, mostly drones handling cargo management. Cass signaled to Sway. "Where's our shipment?" Zia tapped her wrist display. "Cargo hold 3, forward section." They moved fast, gliding past crates of compressed waste and rusted equipment until they reached the cargo hold. And there it was. The spools of carbon microtubules, haphazardly secured inside a shipping crate stamped for off-world disposal. Some of the spools had been damaged in the firefight with the Whistlers, their casings scorched and dented. "At least we got something," Juno muttered, prying open the crate. "Let's move it to the airlock," Cass said. "Fast." They worked quickly, securing the remaining spools with tether lines. Then Cass heard it. A sharp metallic clang from deeper in the ship. "What was that?" A pause. Then another clang. Cass's jaw clenched. Crew's awake. The first crew member floated into view, wearing a vacuum suit, their face lined with exhaustion. They blinked in confusion, taking in the armed intruders loading stolen cargo into their own vessel. "What in the—" Rayler moved instantly, launching forward and slamming the worker against the bulkhead, holding him in place. "Easy, friend," Juno said, flashing a grin. "We just need some cargo. Be real quiet, and you don't get vented into space." The worker's eyes darted toward a nearby console, probably thinking about triggering an alarm. Drayan noticed. "I wouldn't." Cass sighed. "Look, we don't want to kill you, but we're taking this shipment. You report this and your bosses will just write this off as lost waste. No one needs to get hurt." The worker gritted his teeth but said nothing. "Smart choice," Cass muttered. With the last spool secured, they pushed off toward their airlock, locking the cargo in place. "We're clear," Shui confirmed, "cutting the clamps in 10 seconds. "Let's go," Cass ordered. They slipped back through the breach, sealing it behind them. As soon as the clamps disengaged, their hauler fired its thrusters, pulling away from the disposal ship. "And just like that," Juno smirked, "we're officially the first idiots in history to rob a garbage truck." Cass exhaled, watching the stolen spools float in their cargo bay. Let's just hope it was worth it. They had made it. They had the cargo, not all of it, but enough to count. Cass sat near the pilot seat, exhaustion settling into his bones. Zue checked the spools, ensuring the magnetic seals were intact. They had what Cordova wanted. "What now?" Shui asked. "Now," Cass muttered, "we deal with the boss." Silence. They all knew what that meant. They were supposed to bring back everything. The Whistlers had stolen or ruined more than they recovered. Cordova wouldn't care about why, only that they had failed to meet his full demand. Juno exhaled. "You think he'll still pay us?" "Pay us? Sure," Raylor said darkly. "The real question is whether he lets us keep breathing afterward." Cass didn't say anything, because that part wasn't up to them anymore. They were heading back to Cordova's territory, and they had no idea if they'd be walking off this ship when they landed.
Enjoy this story? Subscribe to Free Science Fiction Stories for daily sci-fi adventures.